Hi, this is Doug Jessop. Welcome to this episode of Family Heritage Stories, where we get to preserve stories. And today, this guy has got one heck of a story, Randy Millican. Randy, thank you for coming on today. Now, Randy, let's get real. You got the vest, you got the hat. There's obviously some kind of story behind this. And what's really cool is that people may not realize is that there's a group of you that came here today to be interviewed. And I gotta ask the first question is, what in the world's the 159th DustOff?
The 159th DustOff was a unit of the U.S. Army that served in Vietnam. And our primary mission was to rescue the wounded, most often under fire. And we were unarmed, had no weapons at all. And we rescued American, Vietnamese civilians, enemy forces, Philippines, whoever called, we went to their aid.
No, wait a second. You just said something that I was not aware of. Okay, you're saying you went into a territory, okay, where there were wounded people and
freshly
wounded people, and you were not armed?
We were not. We had personal sidearms, but we didn't have. There, if I may, there was a similar unit, and it's called M.A.S.H. And that was a unit that was organic to an infantry division, for example, the 101st Airborne, 1st Cavalry Division. They only picked up their own people from their battles that they were involved in, but they each had 2 M60 machine guns. And we picked up, as I said earlier, not exclusively, we picked up anyone that needed to be rescued. And we figured we could get a couple, 3 more patients without having the machine guns if we had the room to put the patients. Yeah. So that was the way we approached all our missions.
Were your helicopters marked differently than any of the other helicopters that might be used in battle?
Absolutely. They were the Green Army Huey helicopters, the hot rod of our generation. But they were very cleverly marked with a white background and a red cross, which made it easy for the enemy to identify us and direct their fire toward that red cross.
Oh, so instead of having people say, hey, don't do it, they actually put a target on you.
Well, and they knew we were unarmed.
Oh.
You know, an old adage of the enemy is if you wound or kill one person, you've only killed or wounded one person. But if you wound a person and somebody else comes in to rescue them, you have more opportunities and you take more people out of the battle. So they would see these big white and red crosses and they would direct their fire toward us. And we always heard that they got an extra allocation of rice if they were to shoot one of us down.
Jeez. So what year would this have been?
Well, my unit, the 159th, was in Vietnam for 7 total years. I believe, I want to say 1965 through the end of the war. Okay. And we never had more than maybe mechanics and all included, we never had more than maybe 50 people at any given time, so over that period of time. So it was a rather small, select, elite group.
Now, obviously the Vietnam War had some interesting political issues and stigmas and all that kind of stuff, but the reality is that you guys were there. It doesn't really matter how you got there, but it's like, okay, there's something that happens when you are there together. You said it's an elite group. Is this one of those where, how did you get into the group, I guess is the question.
Everyone in the unit was a volunteer.
Really?
Everyone in the unit was a volunteer for the unit. And some of them were draftees, but they chose to do that mission. And if I can say this, there's a lot of Vietnam veterans have a great deal of discomfort when they think back of some of the things they were forced to do to defend themselves, their brothers, their buddies, to defend their lives, to take lives. Our mission was simple. We were unarmed. We came there to save lives. So we I think in our later years are a little more comfortable with our service because we had a mission to bring people home alive that wouldn't have made it otherwise.
You've got a patch right here. What's that patch represent?
That is a combat medic badge for a medical specialist.
So for those people out here that might not know, what is a combat medic?
It's an EMT. And actually it is it is the root of all modern day civilian medical evacuation helicopters and services. It's where the EMTs and the paramedics came from. It's where the, whatever you call it in this area, life flight, the emergency helicopter that comes in and picks up critical people and moves them to hospitals. That's where it really all began.
So Randy, tell me, let's go back a lit'll bit. So where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Texas in a very small community called Throckmorton, which is up on the Texas-Oklahoma border. Little town of, my graduating class had 19 in it, so it's a pretty small place.
Mm-hmm. So how did you end up getting into this unit and into the war itself?
Well, I wish I could show you. There's a famous Life magazine photograph that made the cover, and it's a bunch of, I believe it's Marines, being evacuated atop of armored personnel carrier, and they're all wounded, and there's one guy there holding this bottle of IV fluid for a guy that's covered in bandages. And I'm just out of high school, and for some reason that photograph really spoke to me down deep. So I joined the Army and told them the only way I would want to be in the Army is if I could be a medic, if I could be that guy. And luckily I had the aptitude for it, and took the training, became a medic. But they kind of, the Army never gives you anything cleanly. So they decided they wanted to make me an operating room technician, the guy that hands all the instruments to the surgeons and things. So they did that. I was sort of a captive audience, and still holding out to be that guy I saw on the Life magazine cover. But I went through medical training school at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. I became an OR technician, and they sent me to Vietnam, and they put me in, if you remember the TV series M.A.S.H., well, this was called a M.A.S.H. unit, they called it that, although they were inflatable buildings instead of a tent like M.A.S.H. was. So that was the first line medical unit that troops freshly wounded from the field went to. And they went to pre-op, they stripped their clothes, started IVs, emergency intervention, and then they went into surgery. And the doctors there did some fantastic things. I remarked that they came in a lump of green and red goo, and these doctors put them back together. And I saw a lot of guys that would have died had they not had the skill of the surgeons that saved their lives. And so I spent a year doing that, but I still want to be the other guy. But I had something new, a new prize struck me. There were guys on helicopters with the red crosses on the side, and they were bringing these guys, these severely wounded men, into the hospitals, and they were getting them there alive for the surgeons to work on. And I decided that's what I wanted to do. So once my 1 year tour of obligation in Vietnam was over, I signed up for a second one if they would promise me I could do that. And a couple of snafus and a little red tape, but I finally got there. And I'm so proud today that I did that, because of my friends and brothers you're going to meet and talk to, I know, and you'll understand why I say we're all the same guy. We're all made of the same thing, and we all have the same goal, and that's to help people in need.
Before going, had you had any medical training, any kind of exposure whatsoever?
None. My dad was a hunter, and he had a lot of dogs, and I used to help him stitch them up and, give them shots and things like that. But no, I had never had any training at all.
Okay. So, Randy, from what I understand, because I've interviewed, a M.A.S.H. medic actually just recently, but you brought up something that's kind of intriguing. Okay, they've gotten there. They were somewhere else. They got hurt bad enough to come here and get help, but somebody had to get them there, and I'm guessing that it's pretty touch and go when you've got, you're out in the field. Do you remember the first helicopter journey out to go get someone?
I do. I remember I remember several missions, not a lot. I mean, there were we all did hundreds of missions. There were thousands of people we rescued. And I use the word rescue. Some of them weren't as severely injured and wounded as the others were. But nonetheless, the numbers piled up over a year's period of time. So up in the thousands, each one of us had our hands on, touched, moved, got them to safety. And there's always two or three that you're going to always remember. And my first one was that very thing. And because I was new, I hadn't been there 2 days, and I was already out flying. Because we had pilots. We had, let's say the crew consisted of a pilot, another pilot, which was the aircraft commander, a crew chief who was responsible for keeping the aircraft flying, and then the medic. So it was a 4-man crew.
4 men, okay. Which man were you?
I was the medic, and we never had enough medics. Never had all the medics we needed, and so a lot of times medics would fly every single day, where the pilots could only fly so many hours, then they had to have a break from it, and the crew chief would have to work on his helicopter. Well, they would just need a medic, so they would just pull me off of this helicopter and put me on another one with another crew. So by saying that, I'm just telling you that immediately I began flying. There was no indoctrination, but of course I'd seen them come and go for a year, kind of watching what these guys do. So it was just a matter of learning how not to fall out of the aircraft when it was in the air, because I already had the basic medic skills, and it turned out the Army did me a favor in the people that I was able to help rescue, because I went in with basic medical skills that every combat medic had. But I'd learned so many other things from the surgeons at the hospital. And I could do things, and I think for a good while, I was the only one in my unit that could do certain medical things that knew how to do them, because I'd been taught them by the doctors. And then, of course, I began teaching the other medics how to do some of these things. Now, if I may, and I know I'm getting way apart from what you asked me, but if you go today and you get an IV, they have this little plastic thing on a needle, and they thread it into your vein, and then they pull the needle out, and they attach the IV tubing to it, and the fluid drips in from this little plastic bag. Well, when I was in Vietnam, that plastic bag was a glass bottle in a combat zone. And we had the old rubber tubing, red, that you see them used to use them to start an IV with. And we had steel needles about that long that had no plastic angiocath, it's called, no plastic covering on it. So you had to leave the needle inserted in there, make sure they kept their arms straight so it didn't infiltrate or penetrate. Well, the doctors, we had the angiocath, the plastic needles in the hospital, and they taught me how to use them. And so every time we'd go back to the hospital, because it was the same one I had spent a year at, they'd give them to me, and then I taught my guys how to use them. So we had a leg up because of the time that the physicians took to train me to how to do certain things.
So to me, I'm guessing that would definitely help the survival rate.
Well, it made the procedure better, easier, faster, and more effective than trying to stick a steel needle in somebody's arm and on a helicopter moving and people shooting at you and writhing around in pain, becoming dislodged. It was much, much better. If it wasn't better, why would the doctors use the thing? So,
yeah. Well, and I realize that, your mileage may vary and everything's different, but describe what a typical rescue would look like.
Let's start with a helicopter.
Okay.
The way it was configured, we could take you'd call it a stretcher, we call them litters, and it would take 3 litters, and it was configured so that you hang one at the top, one here, and then one sat on the floor. And then we could put wounded where the machine guns were in the other helicopters. We would stick wounded. We would always try to take the least severely wounded and put him on top, because they didn't require as much attention. Or if he was walking wounded, put him in the sides and let him ride there. And then we always had the most critically injured were the ones that I could reach the most easily. And I have to also say, over a year's period of time, our crew chiefs became fantastic medics, because they learned quickly And they would watch, and I would be happy to teach, as were all the other medics. And in return, we would help them wash the helicopters and clean the blood off the floors and everything and keep them running. And so we really became a team. And we switched around a lot, but there was another medic and another crew chief and I that became really good at working together. And after a time, the pilots wanted to fly with just us all the time. I mean, we want those two guys together all the time. But with that said, we would get a mission. We'd be at a base camp somewhere, and we'd get a call that someone was wounded, and we'd get an idea of how many, the type wounds they have, like fragmentary wounds from hitting a booby trap or a hand grenade or a mortar round or something, or gunshot wounds, which you always hated because you know the enemy was much, much closer for them to shoot someone rather than just blow something up and get them. So we'd get the mission, we'd know how many it was, the type, basically the injuries they had, and the location where they were. We'd get a call sign for the unit. That's the pilots did all that up front. And when we'd get there, we'd hover around and find them. And we'd ask them to pop smoke, and they would put a smoke color out. And the pilots would then identify what color we saw rather than saying, throw a purple smoke grenade, because the enemy could hear the same thing, and they would often do that, trying to lure us into a trap. So then we would land, very often, most often under fire, because we went to the point of the injury. They didn't have an opportunity with the jungle to move them to a clearing, because in the heat of the battle. So we would fly in, land. The guys would run up, throw them on. We weren't allowed to really leave the helicopter, because once we disconnected and couldn't hear what the pilot said, if they had to leave, you're just stuck. But we'd take the patients on board. The field medics had done a great job of stopping bleeding, doing all the major things they needed to do immediately while they were waiting for us. And then we would come in and pick them up, and I would do some advanced things like starting some more IVs on them and different techniques for blood control. And we'd fly them back to whichever hospital was best suited to accept the patient according to their injuries.
What's something that people might not know about what the 159th did?
I don't think anybody knows what the 159th was, except the people that know more about us than anybody are the guys that we picked up. They see the dust-off thing, and they know what it means. And but as far as the general public, for your audience, I'm not sure they would know exactly what it is, other than if you think of the yellow or red or whatever helicopter that lands at the scene of a car accident and picks up critically wounded people, injured people. That's what we did. And that's so they might recognize what we began in Vietnam. And actually back to Korea, they tried that. If you remember M.A.S.H, they strapped them to the side of this helicopter, but they weren't getting any medical attention. They were just getting them removed from one location to a hospital. So it was improved upon and decided, hey, let's put a medic inside with them and work on them while they get there. And again, that has evolved now into what you see in civilian medical air transport.
Now, there's another thing that I kind of look at is, so you kind of ran this unit, basically.
Oh, no. It took everybody. Fingers, each finger does something. This is a ring finger. This is a nose picking, whatever it's for. But every finger has a purpose. And we made a hand, and working in unison and knowing what each one of us, what the other one was going to do or had done or was about to do, we worked and we were coordinated. So we all had to be there. Now, jokingly, I would always say, yeah, they're waiting for me because I'm going to save their life. You're just a driver. You just get me there. But think about the guy that kept the helicopter flying and didn't crash and kill us all. So that guy's pretty valuable too. And pilots have to navigate and find where they're going and find the right units and make contact with them, learn the winds and directions and the peculiarities of the area. So well coordinated, like a hand.
Well, talking about that hand, so there's a whole bunch of fingers in the other room waiting to get interviewed. Mm-hmm. Why are you guys still in touch this much longer after the war?
Well, we love each other. I mean, we're brothers. You know, that's thrown around, brotherhood thing, but it's true. We went, a lot of Vietnam veterans, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say most Vietnam veterans came back home. We didn't tell anybody what we did. We didn't want to talk about it because if you remember, we weren't very popular. We were called a lot of names when we came home. So we put it away. We found a job. We went to work. Still had the red mud under our fingernails, but we were bringing home an honorable paycheck. But for some reason, because I told you early on, we're all the same guy. We all had the same thoughts, the same mission, the same desire to succeed, to save a life, that one day we just sort of started connecting each other. I have to say that I chose not to stay in the Army, and I didn't want to leave the Army, but I had already been to Vietnam 2 years, and I had already pushed my luck as far as I wanted. And my parents didn't want me to stay, and I was freshly young married, and so she kind of wanted me to come home too. But so what did I do? I became a police officer, and then eventually a firefighter and a paramedic. So I kind of did the same thing that I was doing then. They all followed the same path. They either stayed in the military or in the medical profession or something that was similar to service above self. And we all feel that way today. And I think that alone has kept us, has made a very, very strong bond that has followed us through our lives. And we didn't get in touch with each other until 1999. And thanks to Mr. Gore, we had the internet, that he invented. And one day I sat down and I typed in 159th DustOff, and bingo, it pops up a guy that I knew. And I summoned up the courage to contact him, and we renewed some friendships and some memories. He wasn't one of these guys, and he wasn't one of my favorite, but I knew his name, and he knew my name. And from that, I thought, I'm making a living being a police detective. I find people for a living. I want to find these guys. I'm gonna treat you like a dog chasing a tennis ball here, because I'm gonna bounce back and forth. But so I started looking for them. The only promise I made, I wouldn't look in the criminal records that I had access to. I don't want to know those things, because these guys have been my heroes for all those years. And I didn't want to know anything that might change my opinion of them. And I began to find them. And one led to another and another and another. And that all led to a reunion. And we got together, and after planning it for a year and a half, the night before I almost didn't go. I almost backed out.
Why?
Well, I was thinking, these guys have been so large to me in my memory for so long. What if I don't like them anymore? No, really, it bothered me, because I held them in such, they're my heroes. To this day, they still are. They got me home. And I thought, what if I don't like them anymore? And as I found out, remember the thread here, we're all the same guy. We all had the same thoughts. Several of us almost didn't go to the reunion. And it was very, I'd like to say it was a healing experience. That's what everybody, it was such a healing experience. It wasn't. It was kind of a, are you the guy that I really remember? As a matter of fact, our name tag said, I may not look like it, but I really am, and then it had our names on it.
Yeah. Oh, I believe it.
But as we began to talk, it was almost as if we went to bed for the evening, woke up for breakfast the next morning, and it was like no time had passed at all. And we all just began to renew the bond that it hadn't broken, it was still there. We still all felt the same way about each other and what we had done and what we had done together. Not one of us, again, could have done it alone. It took everybody to do it. It was a common goal.
Talking about common threads. If I were to ask you and then ask all the rest of the guys, is there a common, I don't know if experience is the right word, but a common thing that you always kind of say, okay, this is what I brought back. This is what shaped me and kind of went through my life, be it good or bad.
Without a doubt. My upbringing, my mother and father, just plain salt of the earth folks. And my dad, and I had a dad that was one of those characters that you, every day in my life now, I talk about my dad to somebody about something that my dad did, said, but my dad always taught me, he says, son, whatever you do in life, always put back more than you take out.
Wise man.
And I can tell you that every one of these guys would feel the same way, and they're still doing it to this day. We've got doctors, we've got career military people. You know, they've given back their entire lives, and life's been good to them. And that, I think that's like you owe it. Like my dad would say, just put back more than you take. It's okay to take good from life, enjoy it. I know that's that's your moniker as well. Mm-hmm. Take what you want, but put more back and leave some for the next guy. Make it better.
Now, talking about the next guy, there's 3 names on your vest.
That's our guys that didn't come back. And they were, I didn't know all of them. I knew one of them. We all knew one of them. The one in the center, Doug McNeil. Doug McNeil. And he was, I think he was on his 3rd tour when he was killed. And Doug is, if I may, he was going to college, a very intelligent man. He's a war protester. He didn't believe in the Vietnam War. And then somebody asked him one day, how do you know? And he thought, gosh, I really don't know because I've not been there. And he enlisted in the Army and became a helicopter pilot and went to Vietnam. And I still have some of his writings, and he explains that, you know, that has changed his life, because you can't say what you do and don't believe in until you're in the middle of it. You know what you think you believe, but until you see it, taste it, feel it, you don't really know.
Well, the other thing that makes a interesting difference with Doug's story is something you brought up earlier. Your unit was unique. Your unit was volunteers.
Exactly.
It's like you're going into the heat of battle. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess this is the thing that I wonder, because on the one hand, you go, okay, I understand I'm going to go help save people and everything. But it's kind of like, did you ever have oh my gosh, this is more than I signed up for, kind of, this is a little bit more intense than I thought? Because I wonder, with you volunteers for something, just like you said, you don't know until you know. Was there anything that, I don't know if surprise is the right word, but is kind of a little bit more, oh, that's surprise, you know, that's different when you went out and you started doing these sorties?
No. Remember, I still have the image in my head of the guy on the tank holding the IV bottle up. And that was everybody's goal, was to, well, thanks, Dad, put back more than you take. You know, that was our mission. That's what we were there for. I know one of my guys you'll talk to, Tom, is going to tell you that we didn't want to give up our life to save one life, but if we could save 2, then there's a reward there.
Yeah.
And so we did think about that. The regrets and the things always came afterwards. You know, you're just steely nerved and you're steady, and you go and you do these things, and then you come back and you think about it, and it scares the dickens out of you, how close it came. You can hear bullets. You can hear them hit. A Huey helicopter is made out of very thin aluminum. You can hear them hit over that whine of that jet engine. You can still hear bullets hit. Yet you have to stand there till you get the guys on board. And I used to tell the pilots, the crew chiefs and the medics are the brave ones because we get out and load people in. Y'all sit in there and hold on. You don't even look. You look straight ahead. We're out there getting shot. But that's not true. They had to sit there and wait for us to get through and loaded and say, ready to go before they sat there and waited on us when probably everything in them told them to, let's get the heck out of here.
Yeah,
but no, I don't have my guys. Can't go yet.
There's the steel.
And the motto of DustOff is, and it came from true story. The founder of DustOff, the guys on the ground, he landed to pick up his wounded, and they said, DustOff, it's getting too hot down there. You need to get out of here. And he says, when I have your wounded, I'm not leaving till then. When I have your wounded, then I'll go, but not till then.
So DustOff was a person.
Well, it really was. And it was everybody. Everybody put a little bit into it, but it was an idea, is all it was. In the beginning, the Air Force thought, when they had the Huey helicopter came out, the Air Force says, we're going to do this medical mission because the Air Force has all the pilots, right?
Right.
And there was a general, General Neal was his name, who fought for us, and he said, y'all may have the pilots, but the guys on the ground that need us are Army. So we're going to train our own pilots to fly. I think that was kind of a thumb in his nose that anybody can learn how to fly. You know, it takes guts to be on the ground where the bullets are.
Yeah, it does.
And so the Army got the mission of creating DustOff, and that's how it was born. But those guys, I'm not going to leave here. I don't care how bad it gets until I have your wounded, and then we'll leave. And that's so we inherited that, and we added to it. And we passed it on to everybody that followed us. And again, look at when they land on the highway out here with lights and rain and who knows what, picking up severely injured people. It's still true today.
So Randy, you're a father, grandfather. Do your grandkids know what DustOff is?
No, they know a little bit about it only because these guys here tell them. Have I mentioned my book?
Let's mention your
When
book.
I say my book, it's because my name is on it. but I collected stories from these guys, and it wasn't easy. They didn't want to tell their stories.
Exactly.
And I pestered and pestered and pestered, and I offended a few, and I opened up a lot of wounds. But I told them you could write about anything you want. The title of the book is very simple. It's my personal year in the company of heroes. Because each one of these guys is my hero. I mean, they got me back. I've told you that. They got me here, and I watched what they did. And remember, I'm the guy as a medical corpsman in the hospital watching these guys come in. I wanted to be like them because they were making a tremendous difference. Put back more than you take. And guys were coming in there alive because of them. So I was in the company of heroes for a whole year, and I still am 50 years later. It's a long time. But, John Wayne's not with us anymore. But I know a bunch of John Waynes. I know heroes. I've lived with them. I live among them. Every chance we get, we talk on the phone, we email, we text, and occasionally we get together.
Well, we share a love of stories because I strongly believe that if stories aren't passed down from generation to generation, they're lost. Exactly. And it's as though those people never existed. And you guys went through hell to help other people. There are, I would say, literally thousands of people that are still alive that then had children. Absolutely. That then have had grandchildren. And so you start doing the math on this thing, and it gives you a tingle. Why is it so important, like with your book and everything, why is it so important for you to make sure these stories
because of what they did? Because of what they did. We have there's a Vietnam War museum being built in Fort Walters, Texas, because that's where the pilots all learned to fly. This is in Fort Walters, tiny little outside Fort Worth. And I know the guys. We've been putting bricks in a wall that they're building, and we all buy the same brick, and it just says, "For the ones we couldn't save." That's who we remember as the one. You hear that all the no, it's not about us. It's about the guys that died and all. But that's true. I mean, these guys wanted to come home just as much as we did. And I just have been fortunate to know a bunch of heroes that got a lot of these guys home that wouldn't be here today were it not for them.
To me, life comes with scars. This is Jessop's journal, okay? I've interviewed lots of heroes, lots of people like you. And it's intriguing because when I chat with police and firefighters and military folks, it's a special breed because, okay, here's danger. And instead of being sane and saying, let's get out of here, you guys go towards danger. So number one, thank you very much for your service, both in the military and in the private, and with the police. But this journal has patina, it has scars, it has marks. So it's kind of an esoteric question, but how do you want to leave your mark?
I want to leave footsteps for, here's my dad again. I want to leave footsteps that my grandkids can follow because they lead somewhere. They're not aimless. They don't just go around and around like all these guys you're going to talk to. Their lives have meant something to people that don't even know their names to this day. They don't know their name, but they're responsible for them being here. Tom, you're going to meet, has taught, no telling how many Army pilots to fly safely and perform to the utmost of their ability. One was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, became a physician, has done countless surgeries he's an ophthalmologist that have, people still have sight because of him. It just, again, to be part of something that means something. And I think it's fair to say that when the last one of us dies, that's the last first-hand account you'll get. But we've left some stories, and we've told a few stories. And today at the airport, when we pick each other up, all these years later, hey, thank you for your service. People don't even know, they're young, so young they don't know what Vietnam was, but they know it was something, and it was important. And who doesn't know that a Red Cross is not some sign of comfort? And so imagine you're a wounded guy lying on the ground, shot all to pieces, and you see that on the bottom of a helicopter coming to pick you up. That's what I've left behind, is that guy. Doesn't know me. I don't know him anymore. I don't know any names. We never knew names. We just knew numbers and wounds, and we picked them up and we brought them home, and they're still alive today. And that's why it's important that our book of my year, each one tells his own story. They're not gory war stories. They're stories from a war, about war, but they're not gory war stories. Mine's about a dog. I'm a dog guy. I had a dog in Vietnam, and you need to read it. It's a good story.
Tell me about shrapnel.
PFC-ED shrapnel. He had the complete name and a serial number because we got him an air medal for so many hours of flight time.
Awesome. And love it.
Well, we waited till our commander was gone to do it. Yeah, well, we had a ceremony. We had a ceremony and the whole thing. But PFC-ED, ED stood for Enlisted Dog Shrapnel. And I went to Saigon on a supply mission, and myself and another guy, my crew chief, picked up this all the beggars on the street, and we got this one young boy who he just captivated both of us. But rather than giving him money, we cleaned him up, took him into a restaurant, and fed him till his little stomach was about to burst. And let him go, and the next day when we got ready to leave, there he stands outside our hotel, and he hands us this little puppy. And I carried him in the pocket of my pants and got him home, and I got him back to our unit, and we made him a little vest with one of these on either side, and he flew with us. We'd snap him into one of the rings on the floor, and he'd go flying with us. And but shrapnel seemed like a perfect name for a dog in a war zone. And it broke my heart when I had to leave him there. But I want you to read the book. I want you to read this story, because these guys, all our stories are very personal to each one of us. and we all share common memories that, you know, we like to say that if it didn't happen to me, it happened to one of these guys, and it's the same thing. We all went through the same experiences. So war stories get better like fine wine every time you tell them, but most of ours are true. They get funnier than they were at the time, obviously. But so we enjoy getting together and doing that. And again, so back to the book. So we've taken it upon ourselves to gift those to libraries and schools. So it's not forgotten what people have done. I mean, I read all those books when I was a kid, you know, from Johnny Reb about the Civil War to the Battle of Britain and all the books about World War II. And of course, I knew a lot of World War II veterans, and so they were larger than life to me. But if you boil it down to it, it's what one person has chosen to do with their life at the risk of losing it.
So did you ever read Rin Tin Tin?
Yes.
I mean, because, you know, Trump or Rin Tin Tin,
Sure,
come on.
Absolutely.
That's fun.
But anyway, I go back to say it again. When you talk to us, you're going to see we're all just alike, and you won't hear gloomy, dismal stories. We all have them, but those don't serve any purpose. But to think what may have happened because of something you did, is pretty fulfilling.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce you to my friends.
With another entry in the Family Heritage Stories, I'm Doug Jessop.
What if you run the damn string?